Hello, today's lesson is going to be about the New World and the Colombian exchange. This is really the creation of the first global economy. So on this slide we have a few important people. We have on the left, we have Christopher Columbus. In the middle we have Hernan Cortez. And on the right we have a meeting between Cortez and the Emperor of the Aztecs, Montezuma. So the story of the first contact, of course, is Christopher Columbus receives funding for an expedition. He went around to many different spots in Europe. He went to Italy, he went to Portugal. He was looking for ships, money, men, everything that he needed to go find a trade route to India going west. They wanted to find a quicker way to do this instead of sailing all around Africa, which took a lot of time, took a lot of money, and they were looking for a more efficient route. Of course, Christopher Columbus sails west, and instead he finds the New World. He finds a native population here that is very different. Of course, he dubs them Indians, thinking that he has found India. So eventually he finds out that he's not in India, and he becomes known as this discoverer of the New World. And when he gets there, he starts committing terrible atrocities against these native people. He sees that they're not Christian, he thinks they're devil worshippers, and he forces them to mine gold, because a part of this whole expedition was Columbus getting rich, of course. So he did these terrible things. The Inquisition at this time was going on, so you had the Catholic Church who was going to try and force these people into becoming converts, and if they didn't, they were most likely going to be tortured and possibly killed. Of course, Columbus coming to America first was subject to a lot of debate, and in 1960 archaeologists actually found some evidence that maybe he wasn't the first European to set foot on the North American continent. So in 1960 these archaeologists discovered some remains in Newfoundland. I'm not even going to try to say that French word there, which is the name of it. But they found some remains from around the 11th century, and this is very important because the sagas of the Icelanders, which was a history of Greenland and Iceland and some of the Nordic people, talked about how a guy named Leif Erikson set up a camp in Newfoundland, which is on the North American continent. It's just a little bit north of Maine. So this evidence, of course, was astounding to historians and archaeologists, and it really put into perspective that the Spanish really weren't here first. So that was important to know. So up on the top here we have Newfoundland, where they found these remains, and on the bottom here, I really like this picture because it shows some Vikings in the North American woods running into some Native Americans. And I think that's really interesting because usually the paintings we see are always of Spanish conquistadors with blunderbusses, attacking some Native Americans. But here we have some shielded Vikings who have swords. I think that's pretty cool picture, and that very well may have how it had been. So, indeed, the New World was inhabited by some civilizations. They were inhabited by a lot of complex societies, very unique in their practices and customs and culture. So, there were three big ones that we had. We have the Aztec, we have the Mayans, and we have the Incans. Now, on the top here, we have what is a Aztec sacrifice. The Aztec believed that every day you had to sacrifice someone, rip out their heart, and give it to the sun god. Otherwise, if this wasn't done, the sun wouldn't rise and their whole civilization would die. So this was very necessary in their minds. And when the Spanish saw this, this was, of course, very disturbing to them. On the bottom here we have the Inca city of Machu Picchu. This is a civilization that was in the Andes Mountains in South America, way up in the mountains. We have a lot of remains there. And on the right here we have a Mayan pyramid. The Mayans, of course, they died a long time before the Aztecs. They had a very complex society. Most famously, of course, was they had their calendar. that's predicted that the world would end in 2012. Of course, that didn't happen, but we had some very complex societies, very unique in many ways. So, the arrival of Cortez, after Columbus had sailed back to Spain, he gave all this wonderful news of a new world, a new continent full of mysterious people, and all sorts of riches that could make anyone have tons of wealth. So, Montezuma, which I talked a little bit earlier, is the emperor of the Aztecs, and he hears from his scouts that a strange people are arriving from the east. And he is very concerned because this happens to be the same year that apparently the god Quetzalcoatl will return. And this is their prophecy that they believed. Quetzalcoatl was a god who traveled east, and in their description he was a bearded man, white, fair-skinned, looked very much like a European. So when the Spanish arrived in the same year of this prophecy that he was expected to return, the emperor was very concerned, and he sent scouts to greet them. So I really like this map here. It shows the route of the Spanish. Of course, they're coming from the east over here, and they travel through the mountains. And over here, you have the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan, and that is on Lake Mexico here. So they got to travel through all these mountains, and they fight along the way, meet some different Native Americans, and they travel to see this great city. So not only was Cortez moving in central Mexico there, Francisco Pizarro arrived in South America with an expedition, and on this map over here it kind of details what he did. He started off in Panama, and he made his way down the coast there, and he encountered the Inca civilization, one of the other great civilizations on the North and South American continent. It's a very, very powerful civilization, very unique, had many different practices, and of course the Spanish were just starting to get to know who they are and what they did. So after they had encountered these different civilizations, the Spanish decide that these Mesoamericans, these native people, are heathens and they are savages. When Cortez arrived on the continent, Montezuma sent a bunch of people to go meet Cortez, and he thought that they were gods, so what he did was he performed a sacrifice right in front of Cortez, and he ripped out someone's heart, and he gave it to them as a sign, as a gift. So of course the Spanish were like, whoa, this is not cool, we don't like this, we don't do this. Basically we're going to kill you because you're not like us. So they move into the capital cities of Tenochtitlan. Up here we have a good little drawing or painting of that. You got the Spanish conquistadors on their horses and their armor as they march down the causeway, and they fighting these people and basically destroying all of them because they were superior in technology and weaponry. And on the bottom here, which is another famous painting, this is Pizarro's Spanish expedition killing and destroying the Inca people. So the Spanish, of course, were trying to take over, get gold, get rich. So after the Inca and the Aztec empires fell, not too shortly after they had arrived, the Spanish started to establish their own colonial government. They started to force Catholicism on the people, force conversions, and they also established the viceroyalties of New Spain and Peru. This map shows a few more of the viceroyalties. A few of these were created many years later after the viceroyalty of New Spain and Peru were made. But these viceroyalties were intended to be the complete administrative authority in the New World. Of course, you had the Atlantic Ocean separating Europe from here, so they couldn't communicate very well, so they had viceroys who were put in charge and were to enforce policy and make sure everything was running smoothly. So after they had established these administrative governments, they created what was known as the colonial hierarchy. Now the colonial hierarchy is over here is a little drawing we have of it. It's a pyramid. You have at the top, you have the peninsulares. Right there you have the Creoles. you have the mestizos and the mulattoes, and you have the Africans and the natives. Now, the peninsulares were, of course, people who had come from the Iberian Peninsula, which would be Spain or Portugal. You had Creoles, which were white people who were born in the New World, usually related, of course, to the peninsulares. You had mestizos and mulattoes, which were mixed people, which would be if a European person married a native person and had a child, that would be a mestizo or mulatto. And at the bottom, you just had the Africans and the natives, who were usually used as slaves or as servants. And of course, they used Catholicism to enforce this. Was a very effective system that worked. So, of course, they used this system to keep control and maintain their power. So eventually, they used this system to create a global economy. And this is what we call the Colombian exchange. So the exchange is referred to as the exchange of goods, whether it be fruits or vegetables, grains, livestock, and even diseases that were exchanged during this period of contact. This was, of course, there wasn't very good things about it too, because you had, diseases such as smallpox or influenza, and these were really detrimental to the Native Americans because they hadn't been exposed to these diseases, unlike the Europeans. So this was really bad in many ways, but it was also very good because Europe was able to get new goods. Tomatoes had never been seen before, potatoes, peanuts, corn, all these things. So in many ways, it was a very good thing because it also helped spur trade. But of course, the downside, of course, was the fact that separation of continents created diseases that others hadn't been exposed to. So the Colombian exchange was very important. We can all be kind of grateful that we were able to get a lot of these products, such as tomatoes and corn, and even tobacco that had never been seen before up until the first contact with the peoples in the New World. So in conclusion here, this is how it went down. We had the Spanish. They decimate the New World civilization. They see them as completely different people. They do not get along, and they feel like God, righteous, given people, need to take care of them, convert them, and put them under their wing, so to speak. So after they had done this, of course, they established the colonial government through this hierarchical system, which used Catholicism as a way to support it. And eventually, this helped create the new global economy. They used these new resources and this new system to spur trade and to bring the world a little closer. So it was very important that the Colombian exchange happened, and despite the terrible things that the Spanish did to the peoples living in the New World. Alright, so now we're going to do a little bit of assessment to see if you've learned anything. So I have a few questions here. Who arrived to the New World before Columbus? What was the name for those at the top of the hierarchical system that was created by the Spanish? What were the names of the two colonial governments that were established in the New World? And could you name two goods that were from Europe and two goods that were from the New World that were exchanged during the event known as the Colombian exchange? So I hope you learned a little bit something today about the New World and the Colombian exchange. I know it's a little bit of a brief history, but it's important to know some of these things, to know how we got these goods and these services and all sorts of things. So thanks for watching, and see you next time.